we were talking last week about a phenomena in which our mood of service often gets aggravated or disturbed when we come in contact with objects of sense gratification, or objects which we believe are meant to satisfy our senses or should be satisfying our senses. And so this is the problem in marriage. When one sees the spouse as an object of their sense gratification rather than an object of their service. So that's what we were talking about last week, and then it morphed into the topic of compatibility. And I was making the point that and Prabhupada made the point that compatibility is not such a big issue if one is Krishna conscious. And then I made the point that the level of Krishna consciousness Prabhupada is referring to is very high, in that one is extremely tolerant and one is always in the mood of service, so that one will not be overly concerned about how the other person is behaving or how the other person is or isn't satisfying them. So, now my wife told me something very interesting, which I will share, which goes along with what we're talking about. She said that she has a friend who's a disciple of Radhanath Swami, and Radhanath Swami told her that you should marry someone you're materially compatible with, because so much of household life is involved with material things. And it's not, for most householders, it's not that they're fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, but they're engaged in doing many other things, which non-devotees do as well, non-devotee householders, in terms of taking kids, working, maintaining a house, and so forth. So he was saying, because so much of what we do is involved with material affairs, we should find someone that we're compatible with. So I thought that was a good point. Materially compatible. And some people are more materially compatible than others. And I don't think any two people are perfectly compatible, but we all have different natures. It's just the way we're created. And we have natures which aren't going to change, and we have natures which are conditioned by environment and circumstances that aren't ingrained in our hardware that will change. But the nature that we have that is ingrained within us, that one should become aware of the other person's nature before they get married, because it's not going to change. And so, what do I mean by nature? Well, we all have different personality types, and some people are very, very much party animals, and some people are very serious, and some people are tend to be more self-centered. It's more about how they feel. Some people are very giving. It's more about others. Some people are very in their heads. They don't exhibit emotion. It's all about figuring things out. Some people, it's just, we're all different. Some people are perfectionists. They're very detail-oriented. Everything has to be just right. Those things don't change about people. So it's something to consider. Now, I wanted to read a few things left over from last week, and then I want to read a letter Prabhupada wrote. It's a very, very, very powerful letter. But Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 1st chapter, 18th verse, the Vedic system of 4 varnas and 4 ashrams is very scientific, and its entire purpose is to enable one to control the senses. So, I think this is a nice excuse me, a nice point to remember, that sometimes it's said that household life is a license for sense gratification. Here, Prabhupada is saying the purpose of the 4 varnas and ashrams is to enable one to control the senses. So, ashram means grihastha, and of course the 4 varnas, whatever ashram you're in, you'll have some varna according to how you work. But we're considered with ashram here. But the point that Prabhupada's making is that any ashram you enter, the goal is to help enable you to control your senses. So when we say grihastha life is a license for sense gratification, it's not. We shouldn't look at it that way, because that's not the complete picture. There is more sense gratification, quote unquote, in grihastha life than there is in brahmacharya, vanaprastha, and sannyas life. But the point of grihastha life is to overcome sense gratification, not to indulge in it. And it's only indulged in a way in which one will overcome it. It's not meant to be that place where one thinks, well, finally I've come to a place in Krishna consciousness where I can really enjoy. So, we should never think that way. Because as soon as we think that way, it doesn't work. It's an illusion, and we're just going to run into trouble. And then it's like anything that you try to enjoy, you'll get frustrated. And if you try to enjoy grihastha life, it means you're trying to enjoy, as we said last week, you're trying to be happy. Instead of married, you're trying to be happy. And we said last week, the goal is to be married. Happiness becomes a byproduct of doing dharma. That's a philosophical understanding that when we say dharma, we mean we could just say doing the right thing according to Shastra. So when you do the right thing according to Shastra, then you become happy. But it's not that you become happy directly by doing things that you think will make you happy. That's the material illusion. So I think, if I do this, it'll make me happy. But what we're supposed to think is, if I do the dharmic thing, then I'll be happy. And the dharmic thing may be doing exactly the opposite of what you think will make you happy. And it may be giving up something that you think will make you happy. So when I titled this lesson, The Dharma of Marriage, and so it's important just to understand what dharma is. And it's a difficult concept sometimes for people to get. Because dharma means doing what's right. But we don't always think in terms of doing what's right. As I said, we think in terms of doing what will make us happy. And sometimes we look at what is so-called right, and we look at that and think, that's not going to make me happy if I do that. That's very difficult for many of us to understand, because we look at cause and effect relationship. No, if I do this, it'll give me this gratification and then it'll make me happy. And so then we try to do that, because that's what makes logical sense to us. But there's a higher logic, and that higher logic is you do what's dharmic. And then what's dharmic may not look like it's going to make you happy, but it does in the long run. And in the long run, what you think will make you happy, it pushes you down. So what is dharmic in marriage? Well, here Prabhupada gives one definition, which is the goal of the ashram and varna, is what? To enable one to control the senses, not to exploit the senses. So, if you're getting married, if you're in household life, then you think one of the functions of household life is to enable me to control my senses, not enable me to enjoy them. And when you try to enjoy them, it becomes a mess, a guaranteed mess. Now here's another interesting thing Prabhupada says. No, not Prabhupada says this. A devotee has written this, I'll read this, I like this. The pursuit of religious principles Dharma elevates the soul to the mode of goodness, the symptoms of which are happiness and knowledge. So this is a really good point, because happiness, at least as we're discussing here, let's say the happiness of household life, any kind of material happiness, it takes place in sattva-gun, it doesn't take place in rajagun. Definitely doesn't take place in tamagun. Rajagun you get a little bit, but it goes sour very quickly. So it's an important principle to understand. If we understand that happiness is a byproduct of sattva, not a byproduct product of rajas or tamas. Then sattva, and what is being said here, it's pursuit of religious principles, dharma, elevates one to sattva. So if I do what is proper according to dharma, it'll elevate me to sattva, and then in sattva, that's where I will experience happiness. So that's why we get it backwards, because in the mode of passion, we don't think dharma will make me happy. We think here is a sense that I have that's agitated, and here is the sense object. And if I gratify this sense with that sense object, that will make me happy. It doesn't work that way, because in passion, everything turns to misery. In ignorance, it doesn't turn to misery, it's always miserable. But in passion, there's hope of some enjoyment, and you get some, but it turns to misery. So this is a very important principle, that dharma elevates one to sattva, and sattva is where we experience happiness. Now, okay, let me read something else. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 22nd chapter, text 34. Those who strongly desire to cross the ocean of nescience must not associate with the modes of ignorance, for hedonistic activities are the greatest obstructions to realization of religious principles. Economic development, regulated sense gratification, and last liberation. This is called the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So, in the Vedic understanding of life, if you do Dharma, religion, then you'll prosper materially. When you prosper materially, you can satisfy your senses. Once your senses are satisfied, then you can think about liberation, which is the ultimate goal. Of course, for us, the ultimate goal is love of Krishna. But in the general sense, the idea is you'll never fulfill your material desires if you don't do Dharma. You'll never gratify yourself, because you'll remain in passion, and in passion you'll never be satisfied. And then you won't be able to renounce, because you'll always want something more. So Dharma elevates us to a point, especially where your intelligence is clear, so you can discriminate. And then you can execute Grihastha life from a platform of utilizing it to guide you in Krishna consciousness. So now I want to read this letter. This letter is very powerful. And it gives a practical example of how Prabhupada is dealing with someone who looks like he's very Krishna conscious, but when you read Prabhupada's response, you see that he's not dharmically engaged in Grihastha life. He doesn't understand Dharma. And I would like to preface this by saying that understanding Dharma within an arena like household life is difficult, because the arena of household life is, as I keep saying, it's very much, from the Western point of view, it's very much based on the relationship, making that relationship really, really good. And then when the relationship is really, really good, then we'll be happy. But it's more than just the relationship as we see it from a perspective, how should I say, from a perspective of our own happiness. Because household life doesn't work if you're not willing to give more than you're going to take. And so often when we think of relationships and happiness, we think of what we can get out of it, not what we can give to it. And especially what we're talking about here is in giving to it, you're giving much, in a much broader sense, you're giving, as we're saying, to dharmic principles. It's not just about do you and I get along well, but it's about how together we do things which are Krishna conscious, which keep us in the mode of goodness. And that's where the happiness comes from. So that's important. Anyway, when I read this letter, then I think this will be more clear. And if you have any questions, just type them in, and then occasionally I'll go to the chat and look and see what's going on there. somehow or other. If you're on Mayapur TV, if you go to Krishna.com chat, that's easier for me. I just somehow had lost Mayapur TV. I'm not even going to go to Mayapur TV, so if you're on it, go to Krishna.com, no, Krishna.com/live, and then the password is Radhe. You can go there. So, this is a letter written January 4th, 1973, to a devotee named Madhukara. I beg to acknowledge your letter dated 22nd September 1972. Oh, almost 41 years ago. I've noted the contents with care. For these questions arising between married husband and wife, you are requesting me to leave your wife and take Vanaprastha order of life. For these questions you must consult with and take permission from presidents in GBC. So he wrote Prabhupada asking to take Vanaprastha. And I think his intention was to not live with her anymore. And the Vanaprastha prepares you for sannyas. Yes, I know your wife Leela Shakti, and I know that she is a very serious and advanced disciple, but now you are married to her. There is some obligation according to your Krishna conscious, our Krishna conscious, or Vedic system. These things cannot be taken so lightly, otherwise the whole thing will become a farce. Simply get married without considering what is serious, the serious nature of married life. Then, if there is a little disturbance, or if I do not like my wife or my husband, let me go away. Everyone else is doing that. So in this way, the whole thing is becoming a farce. So that's the first point. So the dharmic principle is there, is that, okay, you've done this, so whatever difficulties are there, you stick with it, you work it out as best you can. You do it as a duty. And so what the thing is here, there's two things going on. One thing he's saying, which will come up next, is that it's an impediment to my Krishna consciousness. But I think the undertone, maybe he's not even aware of it, is this is just not working for me. It's just I'm not happy with it. And so Prabhupada's addressing that first point, just the difficulty of it. He's not addressing the point that you want to take Vanaprastha, which in theory is a step up. So you might say, well, that's good. He wants us to take Vanaprastha. He's moving up. What Prabhupada is addressing here is, number one, it's premature. Your son is only a year old. It's not time for Vanaprastha. And you're giving up your duty prematurely because you think you're having some difficulty or unhappiness or something. And being so irresponsible in this way, it just makes it a farce that there's just some problem and then I'll just give it up. So now his next point. You say that your association together was hindering your advancement. But Krishna conscious marriage system should not be taken in that way, that if there's any botheration, that means something is hindering my spiritual progress. No. Once it is adopted, the grihastha life, even it may be troublesome at times, it must be fulfilled as my occupational duty. So it's actually the same point. If it's difficult, in other words, Prabhupada's saying, don't focus on the difficulty, but just take that difficulty as part of what is your duty in grihastha life, that in grihastha life there'll be duties. What Madhukar is doing, he's comparing it to brahmachari life, and he's saying, well, some brahmachari things were simple. Now that I'm married, things are more complicated, and I'm finding it difficult to be Krishna conscious. And many men and or women run into this problem, that house of life is more complicated. They have more responsibilities, not only just making money, working outside, not being fully engaged in devotional service, but also just working out their relationship with their husband or wife, which is difficult. And then if they have children, the responsibilities increase, and you spend more time with your family. And so you add all this up, and you compare it to brahmachari life, and think, oh my God, this is really a botheration. I'm brahmachari life, I could be much more Krishna conscious. So then the immature thought is, well, let's figure out how to get out of this. So Prabhupada, he said this is your occupational duty. So again, we go back to the idea of Dharma, but he's making another point. And, well, he's going to go on and make this point further, but he brings it up here. You say your association was hindering your advancement, but Krishna conscious marriage shouldn't be taken that way. Then he says, if there is any botheration, that means something is hindering my progress. You shouldn't think that way. And he'll go on and elaborating on that later, but he's saying that you get into a situation and you think, okay, this isn't good for my Krishna consciousness, but really he was saying, no, you just have to adjust to it. It's not the situation. But and I won't talk about that now because he talks about it more. So then he goes on to say, of course, it is better to remain unmarried, celibate. So in that sense, he's agreeing. Well, being unmarried is simpler. But now he makes a really interesting point here. And anyway, I'll read it, we'll discuss it. But so many women are coming, we cannot reject them. If someone comes to Krishna, it is our duty to give them protection. Krishna has informed us in the Bhagavad Gita that even women and Sudras and other inferior class of men can take refuge in him. So the problem is there. The women must have a husband to give protection. Of course, the women can remain unmarried, and if there's a suitable arrangement for the temple, protect them. Just like in the Christian church, there's the nunnery for a systematic program of engaging the ladies and protecting them. That is also nice. But if there is sex desire, how to control it? Women are normally very lusty, more lusty than men, and they're weaker sex. It's difficult for them to make spiritual advancement without the help of husband. For so many reasons, our women must have a husband. That's all right. But if once they have got a husband, he goes away so quickly, that will not be very much happy for them. So now, Prabhupada's making an interesting point, because in telling Madhukara that it's his duty to take care of his wife, he's making a broader point, that we have an obligation to give protection to the women. So he's almost saying, without saying it, but he's almost saying that in our movement, some men are going to have to get married even they don't want to, just to take care of the women. Interesting, huh? I mean, indirectly, that's what he's saying. In making his point to Madhukar, who's already married, who already made the decision to get married, he's trying to make the point and say, look, women need protection. So now you're already married, so you can't give up that protection. You can't just walk away from them. And so many women are coming to our movement and they need protection. They need good husbands, so we have to provide that. What to speak, you're already married. So he's making that point within the context of what to speak, you're already married. Women require protection. And now you want to leave, what to speak. We have to take care of the women who aren't married and marry them. More or less. He's not giving an order for brahmacharis to get married, but he's making that general point to emphasize how his duty is, or men's duty is to take care of women. Or our duty in our movement is to take care of the women who are coming. Now, I do not know the situation in your particular case. I'm simply giving you the general policy or background understanding. We should never think of our so-called advancement as being conditioned by or dependent upon some set of material circumstances such as marriage, vanaprast, or this or that. Mature understanding of Krishna consciousness means that whatever condition of life I am in at the present moment, that is Krishna's special mercy upon me, therefore let me take advantage in the best possible way to spread Krishna consciousness. Now audio is gone. So, if the audio is gone, it just means the computer is slowing down. But if I continue talking, it's probably going to come back. And if I continue talking, then at least the recording gets done. If I stop talking, there's no recording. So I would say, let me keep talking. So at least it gets recorded. and hopefully it will come back on. So you can read or something and see if it comes back on. And if it doesn't come back on, then you can listen to the recording. So at least it gets recorded. I can't think of any other solution right now, because if I type everything in, then we don't get it recorded. And the way that the speed of this internet works, as far as I can tell, it goes up and down based on how many devotees are using it and if anybody's downloading something. So, sorry about that. Yeah. So now, so what Prabhupada is saying here, the Madhukar is writing Prabhupada, and he's saying, it's troublesome in household life. Basically he's saying, brahmachari life is simple, household life is complicated, it's affecting my Krishna consciousness. I can do so much more service, be so much more inspired, enlivened, and free if I'm not married, so I'd like to take Vanaprastha and kind of put this thing to rest. And so Prabhupada is saying general ideas that we shouldn't think our advancement in Krishna consciousness is dependent on a set of circumstances. And then he's saying, whatever situation we're in, we think Krishna's mercy. What Prabhupada means by that is that this is where Krishna has put me, this is where Krishna wants me, so let me take advantage and in whatever situation I'm in, and spread Krishna consciousness from there and conduct my spiritual master's mission. The Prabhupada goes on to say, if I consider my own personal progress or happiness or any other thing personal, that is material consideration. Because now I'm thinking, okay, I'm in Grihastha life, I'm not happy. Or I'm a brahmachari, I'm not happy, or whatever. But that's the situation Krishna's put me in now. So your advancement is not dependent on the external circumstances. Now, you might say, well, if it's not, then why should I get married? You get married to advance, and that might be the most conducive situation. But the point we're making is it's your advancement in Krishna consciousness. You can't say it's dependent on whether, I married the wrong woman or I married the wrong guy, so no, I can't become Krishna conscious and not think of it that way. Or when it becomes troublesome, I can't be Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada goes on to say, if I consider my own personal happiness or anything personal, that is material consideration. So that's the meaning of material consideration. It's about, will this make me happy? If there was unhappy adjustment for becoming married, why you got married at all? So Prabhupada's saying, you're stupid if you didn't realize this was going to happen. So then why'd you get married? Didn't you understand that marriage means you're not going to be a brahmachari? And so then Prabhupada says, whatever's done is done, that's a fact, but I'm only pointing out that once before you did something without proper study of your responsibility. In other words, you got married without understanding your responsibility. Now you're contemplating against some drastic action in a similar fashion. He's basically saying, you didn't know what you were doing when you got married, you don't know what you're doing now, trying to get out of it. So it's all, what Prabhupada's addressing is, what we're talking about here is not being dharmic, it's just being whimsical. Because things aren't going well, so I want to drop it. Therefore consider it carefully in this light. There's one verse from Bhagavad Gita, Yasmin nodvijate loko lokan nodvijate chaha harshamarsha bayod bhir gair mukto yasa me priyaha. He for whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anxiety, who is steady in happiness and distress, is very dear to me. One mistake of judgment often made by the neophyte devotee is that any time there is some disturbance or some difficulty, they are considering that the conditions or the external circumstances under which the difficulty took place are the cause of the difficulty itself. That is not the fact. In the material world, there is always some difficulty, no matter in this situation or that situation. Therefore, simply by changing my status of occupation or my status of life, that will not help anything. Because the real fact is that if there is any difficulty with others, that is my lack of Krishna consciousness, not theirs. Is this clear? Krishna says that his dearest devotee is one who does not put others into difficulty. In fact, who puts no one other into difficulty. So try to judge the matter on these points, whether or not you are putting either your wife or yourself into some difficulty. The right understanding of Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna's understanding. In other words, Arjuna came to the conclusion that he must perform his occupational duty, not as a material obligation, for reasons of wife, family, friends, reputation, professional integrity like that. No, rather he must conduct the functions of his stational life only as a devotional service performed for Krishna. That means that devotional service is what is important, not my occupational duty. But that does not mean that because my occupational duty is not the real consideration, that I should give it up, do something else, thinking that devotional service may be carried on whatever circumstances which I may whimsically decide. So Prabhupada's saying, like, he wants, he's basically saying, I want to give up and do, just get involved in devotional service. And he's saying, no, you see that duty, your dharma, as devotional service. Your position as a grihastha, that is devotional service. And then he makes some very important statements. Very, very important for us. And he's saying a neophyte, the symptom of a neophyte is that when there is a disturbance or difficulty, he thinks that it's the situation or the circumstance which is the cause of the difficulty. And then Prabhupada says, but there's always difficulty in the material world. And so going from grihastha to varna process and that is not going to solve the problem. It's not going to help it. And so what's Prabhupada's point? Is that the difficulty is with you. It's not with the situation, because if you change the situation, the whole point is you change the situation, but you're the same. So I don't know if you have this experience, but I have experience with some people. It doesn't matter what situation they're in. They're the same. They always have problems. Put them in this room or this country, that country, this temple, that temple, this service, that service. If they haven't resolved a certain internal problem, the problem comes up no matter what situation they're in. So Prabhupada is saying here that the situation that you're in is not the problem. The problem is with you. And neophyte devotees don't understand it, so they're looking at the situation saying, if I change the situation, I'll solve the problem. So Prabhupada's saying, no, it's not like that. And then he goes back to this point, and he said, now consider what you're doing. By leaving your wife and child, you're putting both of them into anxiety. And that's not what a devotee does. So, you do your duty, don't put yourself, and Prabhupada's saying you're putting them in anxiety, you're also putting yourself in anxiety. So just do your duty as a service to Krishna. And Prabhupada was always upset with devotees who were giving up their duty and who were, what we say, mental about what they should be doing. So then he refers to Arjuna. Arjuna was also getting mental, but Krishna said, do your duty. So Prabhupada is referring to that aspect of the Bhagavad Gita in order that we can become grounded in doing whatever we have to do, even though it's difficult. You see, the thing is, I can just speak from experience, when you're going through difficulty, the worst thing that you can focus on is how miserable the situation is and how difficult it is. because it just exasperates the situation. What you want to focus on is your duty. Okay, the situation is difficult, but what is my duty in this situation? Because if you focus on your duty, then you can kind of take the difficulty in stride. So, okay, I am in Grihastha life. Grihastha life means there are going to be just circumstances which are different than the circumstances I deal with as a brahmachari. And when they come up, I can't think, oh, this is horrible, why did I get married, or when my wife or husband acts like a normal man and woman acts, but I don't like the way normal women and men act because I think women are weird, or I think men are weird, and then I get frustrated. And no, it's not like that. It's accepting this is just the reality of the situation, and within that situation, I have a dharma to do, and if I stick to my dharma, then I'll be okay. But if I start looking at what's wrong with the situation or how I wish it were different, then I just get completely frustrated. Then I end up like this devotee, and I just want to get out of it. So then Prabhupada ends this section saying, you have to take the conclusion Arjuna took. He said, it's duty. So, you have to see Grihastha life as duty. If you see, the whole problem is, the more you understand this, the more it becomes clear. You're entering into Grihastha ashram, you're thinking, okay, this is the place I get sense gratification. Then what happens when you don't get it? You get frustrated, and you go, why did I do this? I came for sense gratification. I'm not getting it. Why should I waste my time with it? I can just be a brahmachari. There's no sense gratification there, but I don't have to waste my time dealing with this woman and dealing with these crazy kids and these bills and this and that and the next thing. So that's because we're not taking it dharmically. When you take it dharmically, you don't think that way. You just think this is what it is. You don't live in the past, go, oh my God, I should have never done this. You just go, this is what it is. You can think about, I should have never done it when you're 60 and it's time for Varnapras. And you go, well, I'm glad to get over that. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or by that time you think, no, it was good I did it because now I'm over it. But when you're in it, to just be meditating on everything that's wrong with it and how it's disrupting your life, it doesn't work. And it's not our philosophy. So the Prabhupada goes on to say, rather, he, meaning the devotee, he must conduct the functions of his station of life only as a devotional service performed for Krishna. That means that devotional service is what is important, not my occupational duty. But it does not mean that because occupational duty is not the real consideration that I should give it up and do something else, thinking that devotional service may be carried on under whatever circumstances, which I may whimsically decide. Whimsically means you just act not according to duty, but how you feel. Krishna recommended Arjuna to remain as he was, not to disrupt the order of society and go against his own nature, just for convenience sake. It's another convenience. Whimsy and convenience, what feels good, all of that. Then you can't be dharmic if you think that way, which is the way we think in the West, because we're programmed to feel good. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. If it feels good, do it. That's where we come from. Occupational duty is not arbitrary. That means once we have taken up some field of action, if we are advanced in our understanding, then we shall not change it for another service. Rather, our devotion is the important factor. So what does it matter what I am doing so long my work and energy are completely devoted to Krishna? Yeah, so the real thing is, okay, whatever situation you find yourself in, use that as an opportunity to advance your devotion. Krishna recommended Arjuna to remain as he was, not to disrupt the order of society and go against his own nature just for convenience sake. Our occupational duty is not arbitrary. That means once we have taken up some field of action, if we are advanced in our understanding, then we shall not change it for another. Rather, our devotion is the important factor. So what does it matter what I am doing so long my work and energy are completely devoted to Krishna? Okay, so you're Grihastha, just do it all for Krishna. You're sannyasi, do it all for Krishna. The point is your devotion. Just like Krishna, he is the supreme personality of Godhead. He has no work, neither he has anything to do. Still, he comes here to teach us this lesson. He accepts not only his occupational duty as a cowherd boy, royal prince, but also accepts married life. He hence enters politics. He is a philosopher. He's even chariot driver during a great battle. He does not give example of himself avoiding his occupational duty. So if Krishna himself is exhibiting by his own conduct what is the perfection of existence, then we should heed such example if we are intelligent. Even supposing there is wife at home with children, that does not matter. There is no hindrance to our spiritual life. And once we have accepted these things, occupational duties, we should not lightly give them up. That is the point. Of course, our occupational duty is as preachers of Krishna consciousness. So we must stick to that business under all circumstances. That is the main thing. Therefore, married, unmarried, divorced, whatever condition of life, my preaching mission does not depend on these things. The Varnashram Dharma system is scientifically arranged by Krishna to provide facility for delivering the fallen souls back to home, back to Godhead. And if we make a mockery of this system by whimsically disrupting the order, that we must consider. That will not be a very good example if so many young boys and girls so casually become married and then go away from each other, and the wife is little unhappy, the husband is neglecting her in so many ways like that. If we set this example, then how the thing will go on properly. Household life means wife, home, children. These things are understood by everyone. Why our devotees have taken it as something different? They simply have some sex desire, get themselves married, and when the matter does not fulfill their expectations, immediately there's separation. These things are just like material activities, prostitution. So, we've got a Skype here. Sound is clear, many thanks. Oh, good. Good. We're back in line. So, here Prabhupada is saying, they simply have some sex desire, get themselves married, and when the matter does not fulfill their expectations, immediately there is separation. These things are just like material activities. So then the important thing is the expectations. So what was the expectation? That's my whole point. When your expectation is to be gratified materially, it's not going to satisfy your expectation. It's not meant to. It's not the purpose of it. But if that's what you want, then you're going to get frustrated and you're going to want to give it up and you're going to want to try it again with somebody else. Until you get to this point where you realize that that's not the purpose. It's not the purpose of marriage. It's not the purpose of anything we do as devotees. To satisfy ourselves materially. Prabhupada's making the whole point here, that the whole point is to serve Krishna. So whatever situation you end up in, you serve Krishna from that. It's not about how much you like the situation or not, but it's how to utilize the situation for service. And now Prabhupada's saying, why haven't devotees understood this? You get married and it involves wife, family, home, children, all these things, and then somehow you don't accept it, you can't deal with it, you want to give it up. And Prabhupada's saying, what kind of example are we setting? It's a very bad example. So it's a lack of responsibility. And then Prabhupada's making the point, which is quite interesting. He's saying, look at the Bhagavad Gita. It was all about this. Arjuna wanted to give up his duty. He wanted to take on the position of a Brahmin. It was difficult. The situation he was in, he wanted to give it up, whimsically, arbitrarily. And so Prabhupada's saying, no, that very situation is there in the Bhagavad Gita to teach us not to do that. Bhagavad Gita, to teach us not to do that. The wife is left without the husband. Sometimes there is child to be raised. And in so many ways, the proposition that you and some others also are making becomes distasteful. We cannot expect that our temples will become places of shelter for so many widows and rejected wives. That will be a great burden, and we shall become a laughingstock in society. There will be unwanted progeny also, and there will be illicit sex, and that we're seeing already. And being the weaker sense, women require to have a husband who is strong in Krishna consciousness, so they may take advantage and progress by sticking tightly to his feet. If their husband goes away from them, what will they do? So many instances are already there in our society, so many frustrated boys and girls. So Prabhupada's saying, it's your duty to be a good husband, your duty to protect your wife. You don't want to just leave your wife alone. There she is with a small child. And then, women need a husband. And so now you leave her, and then what's she going to do? She'll think about getting another husband, and it's just a big mess. So I've introduced this marriage system in your Western countries because there is a custom of freely intermingling male and female. Therefore, in other words, instead of, the Prabhupada could have just come and made brahmacharis, but when he came, he saw that men and women intermingle. We don't have such. We're not of the brahmachari stock, most of us. So he said, therefore I got you married. Therefore marriage is required just to engage boys and girls in devotional service, never mind distinction of living status. But our marriage system is a little different than in your country. We do not sanction the policy of quick divorce. We are supposed to take husband or wife as eternal companion or assistant in Krishna consciousness service, and there is promise never to separate. Of course, if there is any instance of very advanced disciples, married couple, and they have agreed that the husband shall now take sannyas or a renounced order of life, being mutually very happy by that arrangement, then there is ground for such separation. But even in those cases, there is no question of separation. The husband, even he is sannyas, he must be certain his wife will be taken care of nicely and protected in his absence. Now, so many cases are there of unhappiness by the wife who's been abandoned by her husband against her wishes. So how can I sanction such thing? I want to avoid setting any bad example for future generations. Therefore, I'm so much cautiously considering your request. But if it becomes so easy for me to get married and then leave my wife under excuse of married life being an impediment to my own spiritual progress, that will not be very good at all. That is misunderstanding of what is advancement in spiritual life. Occupational duty must be there, either this one or that one, but once I am engaged in something, occupational duty, then I shall not change that or give it up. That is the worst mistake. Devotional service is not bound up by such designations. Therefore, once I have chosen, it is better to stick in that way and develop my devotional attitude into full-blown love of God. That is Arjuna's understanding. So Prabhupada is also saying, in the long run, you'll make more advancement by sticking it out through the difficulty than, let's say you give it up whimsically and so okay, so you can live as a Varnaprastha and your life's easier and everybody bows at your feet, they think you're advanced. But that's what that devotee did, and he ended up leaving Krishna consciousness. He would have been better staying with his wife. And there's so many men who were married who took sannyas and later fell down. They would have been better staying with their wives, even though externally it seems that situation was not ideally suited for them or ideally suited for advancing in Krishna consciousness. So then they took sannyas, which was quote-unquote the ideal situation, but in that ideal situation they weren't able to maintain their Krishna consciousness. And in the not-so-ideal situation, if they just would have stayed there, they would still be Krishna conscious today. They wouldn't have left. So, sometimes we look at a situation and we think, oh, this will be better for my Krishna conscious. But that decision may be coming from a whimsical mentality, a mentality that is trying to avoid the responsibility of duty. And so, therefore, doing the duty and sticking it out, even though it's difficult, even though you don't like it, will actually build your character and strength and so forth. And you'll become more Krishna conscious, even if it seems temporarily or not, because you're engaged in other activities. So you have to always look at it that way. And then we see this irony here in that devotees wanted to whimsically give up their duty when the whole Bhagavad Gita is all centered around doing your duty under a difficult situation, which Arjuna was in, a very difficult situation. Likely more difficult than any of us will be in, and not so conducive, apparently, externally to being Krishna conscious. You have to fight and kill people. And so this whole letter relates around the concept of duty, and you can see how duty is just juxtaposed to what I look at as my personal convenience, or what I like, or my personal happiness, what makes me feel good, what's easy. Duty is all about that it's all about not focusing on those things and focusing on, okay, this is the situation Krishna has put me in, this is my service, and it's my service to him, and that's what I focus on. And that's Dharma, and it's a different, and if you enter marriage in that consciousness, or if you're married and you're not in that consciousness, but you adjust to that consciousness, then it's just so much easier, because you're not evaluating everything in terms of, does this make me happy or not, and looking at your husband or spouse or your wife thinking, oh, I don't like what you did, it's just not making me happy. Well, that's not the real goal, because you become happy, as we said in the beginning, you become happy by being Krishna conscious, by coming to the mode of goodness. That's how you're happy. And what he's doing is not the mode of goodness. It's definitely the mode of passion. So, I want to end here and see if anyone's still there. Okay. I think you're back online, maybe. Anyway, I'm assuming some of you are online, because your name is up there, so you haven't gone anywhere. So if you have a question, before we go, you can ask your question. Seems like some of you have disappeared. You're not active on chat, but otherwise, if there's no questions, we'll let you go and do your duty, no matter how difficult it is. Actually, my own realization that is, when something's difficult, you don't want to meditate on the difficulty. You don't want to meditate on how hard it is. You want to meditate on what you have to do. Because when you meditate on what you don't like and how hard it is, it just becomes more difficult to do it. But when you meditate on your duty, what you have to do, and how to best do that as a service to Krishna, then you're okay. Then you can get through it. Because it's you live where your consciousness is. It's not that you live. You say this situation is difficult, but it's not. But you live where your consciousness is. So if your consciousness is focused on the difficulties, then it's difficult. If your consciousness is not focused on the difficulty, but is focused on how to do your service within that situation, how to make it better, how to improve it, then that's where you live. And it's just smart. In any situation you're in, you're always thinking, how can we improve this? How can we make it better? How can we be more Krishna conscious, or how can I do service better? We always have to think that way. But if you're in a situation which is difficult, and then all you're thinking about is how difficult it is, it's the wrong way to think, because you're no longer thinking about duty, you're just thinking about what you don't like. And the more you think about what you don't like, the more depressed and discouraged you get, and disgusted. And the more disgusted you get, the more your energy is zapped. And the more negative you become, and the more the difficulty seems to increase in your mind. So you're living in this world of, I don't want to do this, I don't like it, it's difficult, rather than living in the world of solutions. Well, it's how can we best deal with the situation, move it forward, make the best use of it. That's the idea. Okay, so we're going to sign off.